Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the second but last session. My name's Helen Russell. I am the Chief People Officer at HubSpot and very excited to be able to spend time with you all. And to help me throw some questions at me, I'd like to invite Tina Patterson. Tina is local, unlike my accent, and Tina spends her time really working in the space of driving outcomes versus hours. And so given the topics that we're talking about, we thought she'd be a fantastic person to do the Q&A with me. So please welcome Tina Patterson. Thank you. Nice to see you.
So lovely.
Okay.
So we are all in for an absolute treat today. So Helen Russell is one of the most forward-thinking leaders that I know. She's business savvy, and I think the thing that I love most about her is she is authentically human. And that's going to come through in the conversation we have today. But before we get into it, I'd love to just share a secret with you, which is backstage, I have a packet of Tim Tams for Helen, because coming from a different country, I think she needs to learn how to do a Tim Tam slam, but I am going to make her work for it.
Okay.
So are you ready for that, Helen?
I'm ready. Whatever a Tim Tam slam is.
So we're going to start off talking about culture. And I've heard you say many times that you shouldn't leave culture to chance, that it should be something that is designed. And so I'd love for you to share how you actually go about doing this, particularly in a way to make it cohesive and human.
Yeah. And I will credit, I've been at HubSpot for a year, just coming up for a year at the end of June. And I will credit HubSpot in particular for considering culture as a product. So when HubSpot was founded 19 years ago, and we had two co-founders that were really coming from MIT, very tech savvy. And so culture wasn't something that they'd necessarily done before. But I loved that they brought this very first principle way of thinking about it and talked about culture as a product. And if you think about culture as a product, you're always iterating, you're always testing, you're always evolving, because you're trying to make sure that the product is getting better over time. And so that's how I really want to think about culture and like to think about culture. And I think one of the challenges as you scale is, what are the things that you hang on to and what are the things that evolve as you grow? How do you maintain the essence of who you are as a company, but also evolve towards who you want to be and need to be as you grow? And so we've spent a lot of time sort of really thinking about culture. And we tried to bring that to life at HubSpot by turning our culture into an archetype. And so think about it when you're thinking about who you're selling to and you're thinking about your customer. And we created who we said were our customer, so the employee of HubSpot, and we called her Gigi. And Gigi, a little bit of cheesiness, Gigi is short for Grow Getter. And we brought our culture to life by saying, what are the attributes of Gigi? What is it that we are looking for in the types of people that we hire, in the types of people that we promote, in the types of people that we recognize, to really help bring it to life for our employees? And also by creating a sort of abstract character called Gigi, and we've put an avatar and everything around this, it allowed us to talk about what we were looking for without necessarily pointing to people and creating Tina's amazing. She's exactly what we're looking for, and creating this sort of discomfort between people and rivalry. And so the reason I wanted to show this slide is that culture only comes to life if you embed it in all of the critical moments that matter. And so what are the attributes that you're looking for when you're hiring? What are the questions that you ask that really test whether this is someone that's going to thrive in your environment? How does that show up in your onboarding? How does that show up through your engagement surveys, the things that you measure? How does that show up in how you promote, how you performance manage? And so it's by weaving it through all of those significant moments, as opposed to back in the day, I won't say what company, but culture was defined by the sticky on the back of a poster on the back of the toilet door. Never to be talked about, but these are the cultural attributes. Whereas to bring it to life, it really has to be woven through all of those moments that matter.
Amazing. And you mentioned that you spent a lot of time thinking through the attributes of Gigi. Can you share, to bring it even more to life, what you came up with?
Yeah, certainly. And this was really us co-creating as an exec team and thinking about when we look at those people that are really thriving here, and here at a time when there is disruption and change like nothing we've ever seen before, what are those attributes of those folks that immediately come to mind when you think, who are our rock stars? And it started with the people that are mission first, that really are solving at the right thing for the company versus solving at the right thing for the team or for themselves. So they had mission orientation. The second thing was they were incredibly adaptable. They would just roll with change. They would roll with things that you were throwing at them, and nothing ever was going to faze them. They also were incredibly bold and courageous. And bold and courageous by the types of risks they were taking, so very innovative, but also bold and courageous because they were prepared to go to bat, to have the difficult conversations, to push when others were sitting back. And then finally, they had growth mindset. So they were curious, they were open, they were constantly looking for opportunities to learn. And so they became the archetypes of Gigi, and we wove them. So imagine now you're coming for an interview, and I'm interviewing you and I'm saying, okay, these are the types of questions that I'm going to ask to understand if you're mission orientated, to give me examples of where you were bold, where you were courageous, where you were adaptable. And it just started to really help bring to life what it was that we were looking for in this evolution of our culture.
I love that because it's so intentional how you go about it.
Yeah.
I'd love to get your views on a different aspect of culture, and it seems like we've still got this tug of war when it comes to flexibility versus structure.
Yeah.
And I know that at HubSpot you remain committed to hybrid. So I'd love for you to share why are you still committed, but also for the leaders out here who find that they are still counting the hours instead of the outcomes, what would you share with them?
Well, maybe it would help me just to get a sense of, in the room, how many are you working in a company where you're coming into the office full time? Okay. They're all like, okay. How many are working where it's hybrid, where there's like a set number of days? Okay, that's the majority. And how many, it's flexible, you can do whatever? Okay, so we probably lean a bit more towards hybrid. My next question is, do you all know why your company has chosen the path that you have taken? Is everybody, maybe a show of hands, who knows why you've landed at where you've landed? Okay, so maybe 30% of the room. This is the key. This is the key. First of all, I don't think there's a right or wrong path, honestly. I think there's the context of what's right for you, why you've chosen the path that you've chosen is the most important thing. And I think what I would encourage you is where you aren't clear on the why, how do you become clearer on the why so that you can also sell it when you're hiring and you're recruiting and you're sort of selling your own story to your own people. The why for us is has various different aspects to it. So maybe if I share a little bit more about our why of staying committed to flexible. And we say flexible because we've never actually stipulated a number of days. We've basically said whatever works for you in your role. And so what we do know is that pre-COVID, there was a life pre-COVID, which sort of seems like, God, was there a life pre-COVID? Where I'm just thinking back to the types of roles I had, where for many years I was sitting in London working for a US-based company and dealing across multiple time zones and across very distributed teams. And actually, we were sort of intentionally distributed, right? There were very few teams that I worked with pre-COVID that were sitting in the same office, on the same floor, in the same building, on the same time zone. Very, very few. And so we were all almost somewhat practiced in how do we work in a way when we don't have all of the people co-located. COVID hit, and then life sort of threw a real wobbly at us, and then we went back, and then we sort of forgot what that life was like, and so we felt like we had to spell it out very clearly. What do we expect of you going forward? So what we decided was, from a mindset standpoint, we're going to start from a place of trust. We're going to trust that whether we see you in the office or we don't, that you are doing valuable work and that you're driving for impact. So that was point number one. We also felt that the genie was somewhat out of the bottle. During COVID, we'd had a lot of people that had moved to lower cost locations, that had moved to a distance that suddenly wasn't really commutable anymore to where the office had been. And so had we suddenly reversed our decision and said, can everybody get back to the office, we would have lost a lot of people as a consequence. We also realized that so much of our work and the complexity of how we did things was cross-functional, cross-country, multi-discipline, multi-time zone, that actually we would have been bringing people back into an office who were spending time on Zoom talking to someone in another location. And then it was just like, we just don't think this is going to work for us. But the only thing that we can lean into making this work is that we have to change how we work. We have to make sure that we're really clear on expectations, unbelievable clarity about what's expected of you. We're really clear on the rhythms and routines that we expect of people to make sure that we're maximizing time zone overlap, and that we make sure that connection is really, really high. And I say connection as if it's this grandiose thing. And you and I were talking about this earlier, Tina. Connection is as simple as, are you having a one-to-one? An assumption that you should never make, because you think that these one-to-ones are always happening, and I'm having, meeting with my direct reports. Don't ever assume. Trust and verify. And so make sure that you're creating those connection moments that ensure that people are not feeling like they're missing out because they're not coming into the physical space. And I mean, you have perspectives on this too, and it's probably worth, Tina, sharing some of your experience there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when it comes to, you mentioned how we work, and I find that a lot of people just focus on the where. Is it in the office? Or are they working from home, or hybrid covers that? But I think it's a lot wider than that. When we think about how we work, also thinking about things such as when people work, is it synchronous or is it asynchronous?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people haven't necessarily thought yet in a really intentional way. And I love how you design for culture and being really intentional about, well, what type of work can be synchronous and what type of work do we not have to do it the way things have always been done? It could be asynchronous, not at the same time, and then we can build in a bit more of that flexibility with that structure.
Yeah, the asynchronicity is something that is very underestimated. I was speaking to a HubSpot customer earlier today, and they just built a rhythm and routine of business that was always synchronous. We have a company meeting, everybody dials in, everybody consumes that information at the right time, at the same time, and then we move on. When actually, if you do asynchronous, and we're a massive proponent of asynchronous work, you record a video, and then it's up to our employees, when is it convenient for you to watch that? When is it convenient for you to consume that? And actually we see the engagement in that medium is actually higher, because now we're making it a lot more accessible and easy for our employees to consume it at a time that works for them.
Yes, and what I see also is the companies that don't embrace this, everything what used to be a 5-minute conversation defaults to a 30-minute meeting. And in outcomes over ours, we have a module called Meeting Madness, because we know that 3/4 of meetings are actually ineffective.
Right.
So once again, being deliberate and intentional is such a big part of creating that culture.
Yeah. And I will say, just as someone who will push out a video to my team, there is a level of intention that you bring to try and make that crisp, pithy, succinct. Not quite the same level of intention and discipline when you're having a meeting and it feels a little more of a discussion. And so you really do it in a lot more of a speedy time. And because I talk slowly, I always say to my team, put it up to speed 1.2 because then you'll get through it even quicker. So it's even then, people can even consume it at the speed that they want. So
amazing. So there's another lens when we think of hybrid also, which is artificial intelligence, AI, versus human intelligence.
Yeah.
And can you share what insights you're seeing or what shifts that you're seeing with your teams, as well as how do you ensure that for your people they remain relevant, curious, creative in this age of AI?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we had to do was to make sure that all of our employees understood that we were encouraging this, that it isn't something that you have to hide. It isn't something that you submit. You know, I have 2 kids in college, and there's a little more of a, well, I just used AI for this, and then I'm gonna, you know, it's a little more sort of under the covers, if you will. Whereas we set out and said, we want to be an AI fluent company. We want to encourage it, we want to embrace it, and we want to share any lessons that we learn along the way. And so we set out with this very, very high level of trust and high level of expectation around adoption. And I always believe what gets measured gets done. We have access to the tools and the LLMs in particular that we have pushed out. And we are looking at every couple of weeks just to see how adoption is climbing. And there are various different strategies that we've rolled out to make sure that we're sharing use cases and experiences. So in my team, for example, we do what we call a Monday Minute. Monday spelt M-O-N-D-A-I. Did you see what I did there? We're very creative in HR, very creative. So we have a Monday Minute. And first of all, notice it's a minute. So it really forces whoever's sharing their use case to be really, really crisp. Because also we have a generation that consume TikTok videos and really have no attention span beyond about 3 minutes. So make sure that it's short, sweet, and to the point. What started to happen, which was an unintended surprise, was as soon as one of our team shared their minute, 5 others followed with, oh my God, that's awesome. I did something similar. And we started to find that our one example of a Monday Minute turned into 10, 15. And so each Monday we've created this discipline, and everybody is learning from each other. And so it's become this like all boats rise. We also did Grow Day, day spelt D-A-I, and Grow Day was really about galvanizing the entire company. We brought in inspirational speakers. We did fireside chats. We had we created like a learning room where you could go and do all of these use cases and experiences, because we're trying to make it like inspire commitment versus drive compliance. Like it's all about inspiring commitment. And also creating healthy competition. I'm super competitive, and so when Yamini was showing what each function had done, it's like, come on team, we are getting our asses beat by legal, and that's not okay. And so making sure that we were creating this real healthy level of competition. But also even going back to the embedding, as we talked about culture in all of those moments that matter, how do you make sure when you're hiring, use AI in your hiring process? Set the expectation very early on that this is a place where we expect you to use it, and so we're going to be testing for it during hiring. Onboarding, within the first hour now, within our 2-day onboarding, we're already giving you access to AI. We're showing you how it's relevant to your function, to your team. We break people off into whatever team they're coming in. We show them use cases and examples of how they can use that. When we do performance management, it's going to be about show me examples of the 3 areas where you've driven up productivity, where you've really improved workflows. So again, take those moments that matter, embed it, and start to make it just feel very much part of the fabric of who you are.
I love how you focus on the use cases, because I hear a lot of companies and leaders talking about AI, and it really is at the level of which tool are they using versus the let's get it to the really practical level of how we can actually get value from this. I love that.
And super practical and super easy. Like the simpler, that's why I love the minute approach, because it forces you to be incredibly simple. And that makes adoption just feel a lot less intimidating, especially for those that maybe aren't leaning as technically savvy as others.
Yeah, and I'm curious, how are you seeing AI impacting things such as org structures and how companies are growing?
I think the today impact is one thing. I think what we're still trying to get our arms around is the tomorrow impact. And so what I would say today, and again, I'm reading everything that's going on in this space right now. So a couple of things that are coming to light. First of all, especially in smaller companies, and I know obviously many of our customers are coming from smaller companies, what we're seeing is slower headcount growth, because companies are starting to test, is there a different way that I can do this thing or these set of tasks without me going out and adding an extra person to do them? So you're certainly seeing at the smaller business side a slower step to growth. In the companies, and again, I meet with a lot of CHROs that do what I do every day. We were together last week, and we had the person from Deloitte who runs the AI practice, who's constantly thinking about the implication of AI on companies. And what he was saying was that they're seeing spans of control. So span of control is how many direct reports that you have. That over the next couple of years, we're going to see spans of control increase by about 20%, which again, isn't that aggressive actually. But the reason the belief is that you can manage more people is because your people are going to be a little more productive. Some of the things that they may have come to you and asked you as their manager, they're going to be able to get those answers through AI. So there's less sort of demand on your time as a manager. You as a manager will have simplified some of your rhythms and routines using AI so that there's more cognitive capacity that you have, so you're able to manage more people. Now, if you think about it, if spans of control are going up, that means you're likely to need less management layers, and so you're going to see organizations become a little more shallow. So if a standard organization of scale has maybe 9 levels, we could see that drop by a couple of levels. And so that's going to help communication. It's going to help how information cascades. And it's going to just, I think, drive up efficiency and productivity. I think what we don't yet have a handle on is several years out. Now, we were both looking at research from the World Economic Forum, and what the World Economic Forum was saying is by 2030, we're going to see about 172 million new jobs added, and we're going to see about 90 million jobs taken away. Now, the good news is, even for people that aren't great at maths, that is a good, there's a lot of room there. But what they also said is that we'll see 39% of roles change. Now, not change altogether, it could just be there are tweaks and things that are made. And so I guess we still don't know what we don't know. And as a parent, and many of you, I assume, are parents, I think we all wrestle with the cognitive dissonance that exists between this sort of world of work where we're pushing and embracing and adopting, and then the world at home where you're having conversations with your children and you're like, God, what does this mean? And so trying to be super authentic about the dissonance that you have and sometimes that you're feeling like you're talking out of both sides of your mouth as a parent versus as a professional. So I think we just have to be authentic about that.
Yeah, and hearing you say all that, Helen, it almost feels like the leadership playbook is being rewritten real time. So, I mean, I'm curious of what do you see the key capabilities that leaders need to be able to manage their teams, not just to kind of exist, but to actually inspire them and for them to thrive?
Yeah, I think, I put this slide just to make the point, and Yamini actually used a slide that said this when we had a big company meeting a couple of weeks ago, because I think, especially when you have a product and it's so sort of at the forefront of pushing AI, you can get lost in the technology. And I think now more than ever, especially because there's just natural anxiety that comes with this, it's a profoundly human moment. Now, you would think, you would say that, Helen, that's your job, but I do think it is a deeply profound human moment. And I think it requires a slightly more sophisticated level of leadership to navigate what are going to be pretty disruptive waters over the next few years. And so the leadership attributes for me that stand out are clarity. I think creating just a really, really crisp sense of what's going on. And clarity for me is what's expected of me, what are the implications of these changes on my role, anything you need me to modify, and where do you need me to focus? Like really, really super simple questions. Context, because sometimes I think we forget that the context of why we're doing something. It's why I asked the question, do all of you have the why behind your decisions of returning to office or not? Context is everything. Just tell me the why. But also I think with AI, we're now saying why now? We're going through some cultural change around, the GG attributes. And our employees are like, okay, first of all, just make sure I understand why and why now. Why not last year? Why not 12 months from now? And of course, we're pushing on this because the level of disruption is happening now. So context, clarity, adaptability. There's never been a time of change like the time that we're going to go through right now. And I think there's an assumption of leaders that the change needs to happen. Those people that work for me need to change. Change starts right here. The first person that needs to change is the person that's looking in the mirror in the morning saying, I need my people to change. Because it's like, what do I need to do differently? How do I need to show up differently? How do I need to adapt in order to bring my team along with me on the journey? And then the fourth and final one is trust and connection. I have to work harder to build a level of trust and a level of connection with the folks on my team at a time that is a profoundly human moment, because I need to really inspire them to come on this journey with me. And so context, clarity, adaptability, trust and connection.
Yeah, I love that. And I interviewed a lot of executives for my book, Effective Remote Teams, and I asked them a similar question. And interesting, the ones that you mentioned, because not only did they mention them, but every single executive that I interviewed said trust. And I think about also a CEO of one of the largest companies here in Australia. I love what he said, where he said, I've been a leader and led tens of thousands of people over 30 years. I could count on one hand the number of people who have let me down by me giving them the trust first. And he said, what an amazing return on investment.
Yeah.
So giving that trust first.
Totally.
Yeah.
People will pay you back and more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we've got time for one final question for you, Helen, and I'd love for you to share, if you could give one piece of advice to us here when it comes to reimagining how we work with our teams, what would it be?
I think what I would say, again, I wanted to make sure that I had something that you could take a photo of and would be something you could take away, which is, especially given that you're all going through disruption, going through change, determining, I had a session with some leaders earlier today before we came here, and there were a lot of common themes that they were wrestling with as leaders. It was like, how do we scale? How do we scale our culture? How do we grow? How do we change? And so where I would start is, ironically, we start with trust. The number one question that you ask as leaders of businesses today is, do our employees trust us, and do they trust our intent? So at a time when you're driving change, does this company trust what it is that we're saying, and how do we make sure that that's the case? Do we create a safe space for experimentation, for tools, for incentives? So again, going back to that, don't feel like you have to, when you give me a comms, like my team will give me somebody wrote their performance review on my team, and I was like, Did you use ChatGPT? Yes, perfect. And again, don't shy away from it. Create safety and the space for people to trial. Do we have an adaptive culture? Again, going back to that adaptability, am I working for and leading a business that is going to adapt and is going to shift at a pace that I need it to? And then finally, change management is one of those sort of consulting-y buzzword type phrases, but I don't think I've ever quite used it as much as I'm using it right now, which is, do we have the things in place that really will help move the ship in the direction that we need to? So these would be the questions to be introspection around the companies that you lead and that you work for, just to really determine readiness.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your pearls of wisdom. I do have one final question for all of you, and that is, I said Helen needed to earn her Tin Tan slab. So can you show your appreciation if you believe, yes, she does and is allowed to be an honorary Aussie? Thank you so much, Helen.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.